Welcome back to My Dad's a Lawyer, a podcast about life, law, and other stuff. I'm Noah Mittman, the son and a lawyer.
And I'm Brian Mittman, the dad and a lawyer as well. Well, good morning, Noah.
Good morning. I'm very excited to be back now that we have our podcast platform figured out. We're launching episodes consistently, so I'm excited to get started and finish the year off strong.
Yeah, it's very exciting. We have our new logo we'll talk about, and you should have seen in the introduction. And I know we're on a couple platforms so far, and we're going to be rolling out to more. We're on, I believe, Spotify and YouTube. We're going to get ourselves onto Apple and some of the other podcast stuff.
Right. So we're excited to get all the episodes to everybody.
Yeah, and as you can see behind Noah, it is a beautiful fall day of gray and rain.
Yes, I'm working. This is my podcast corner, so I'm working on the podcast setup. This is the first episode. I got the ring light going, so hopefully everyone can see me better, hear me more clearly. So we're working on the podcast setup too.
Yeah, I'm working on my lighting. I know it's a little bright, but we'll figure it out. But I got the whole background set up, and the disability doggies up there, Stella
Nice.
and Sadie. I don't have any of my kids. I mean, I have one of my kids on the. Yeah, maybe I'll put a picture of the family up right over here.
Yes, yes. I have some world map up here.
Yeah, I got my disability guides, consumer guides for workers' comp and disability. So that's my official commercial right there.
You're making me think I need to get some, a lawyer apparel to wear.
Oh, hello. Come on. You have to have the swag.
I'll give you some swag.
All right. So we have some exciting stuff to talk about. A lot's been going on since we last recorded. Most importantly, we didn't record for about 3 weeks for a very good reason. And Noah will get into this later, but Noah was on his and first seated. That is, he led his first trial in front of a jury. So he disappeared for basically 3 weeks.
Yes, it was a long 3 weeks, but it was very worth it. It was very rewarding. It was a great experience. The client was very happy with the results. And it was the most lawyer-like thing I've ever done. So it was really cool.
Yeah, we'll talk about it because I sat in on it and brought a tear to the dad's eye and impressed as a lawyer myself.
Yes, so we'll get into that.
Yeah, so before we get there, this comes back to what I noticed at the trial, and then earlier this week I went into the city for a business event, and I kind of was like, for some reason, really tuned into this. So I'm tuned into like what some younger guys were wearing from a business perspective. So I'll call it the skinny suit, right? I'm okay with the skinny suit and everything, especially since I've gotten skinny lately. But more importantly, I was paying attention to the pants, right? The length of dress pants, dress trousers, suit trousers, and socks or no socks. Because I noticed while you were, presenting your arguments, cross-examining witnesses, I looked down and I saw you were wearing some really cool socks, and I could really see your socks because your pants were somewhat, for my purposes, short. So why or what's the deal with short pants and socks or no socks?
For those that don't know and are watching this for the first time, this is called the old guy question.
Why, thank you very much. That is my old guy question.
So I think that when I have those short suit pants, they're meant to be worn without socks and have your ankle showing. I can't get myself to wear dress shoes without socks. It just hurts too much. And I think the new style is to wear, cool, fun socks and have them show. So I think that's the new trend. And then in terms of my suit pant length, I think I need to get them a little bit lengthened. I used to wear them lower on my hips. Now I try to pull them up a little bit so the ankles are showing a little bit, not on purpose, just because that's how I wear them now. And the guy I got my suits from, when he tailored them, that's how he tailored them. I'm trusting his fashion style. So I gotta maybe go back and get that evaluated.
Yeah, so I like the sock piece because I've always worn fun, funky, different socks because that's kind of, you could wear a fairly plain or basic suit color, a basic shirt, and then you have like the tie and the socks, and I think that does say a statement. By the way, though, some old people could teach you a lesson.
Yes.
So women in particular, for years, have worn what are called peds. They are basically socks, but you can't see them at all. They're like cut off below the ankles.
Right.
So
I
you
have no show socks.
yeah, so you would wear those so you don't start bleeding in your fancy shoes
Yeah.
while you're walking around. But yeah, very interesting. Thank you for that
Yeah, I know. I need to
clarification.
figure out my suit, how the suit pants fit. I've gotten the jacket adjusted a bunch. I think it might be time to go back and get the pants fitted.
Yeah, well, I would suggest since you have that guy that does those cool pants and stuff, maybe you just get a pair of dress pants, not even suit pants, just dress pants to test out the feel and the look. And
Yeah.
and you get them done at kind of like the length that you think you want.
Right. Hmm.
So that was fashion advice by the disability guy.
Yeah, maybe I'll just next time I'm wearing a suit, maybe I'll just stop by there at lunch.
Perfect.
Hmm.
Nice.
All right, you got me thinking. Got to add that
Okay.
to my list.
All right. So let's jump into uh, your trial and everything, and I just want to set this up for people because I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there about what a trial is, and I'm not going to really get into the details. You can all that, but bottom line was Noah has a client, had a client that they couldn't settle the case, so it had to go all the way to a trial. So it's in front of a judge and a jury. Um, and as part of that, Noah had the opportunity to question all the jurors, and they picked a jury of 6 people and 3 alternates in case somebody got sick. And then they had to present the case, and the case was broken up into 2 parts. One part was called liability, who was responsible, if anybody. And then once that question was answered, if there was a yes, then it went to what's called damages. That's how hurt the person was and how much money they should get for it. So, you know, I know as an attorney what goes into it. And I know as you were preparing for this, you literally kind of, as I mentioned before, kind of shut down, right? Phone was not just on do not disturb. You weren't looking at emails. You were literally spending your days from morning to night going through every document, speaking to the client and what witnesses you were allowed to speak to, and really getting yourself set up. So here's where I want to start.
Okay.
What was it like to pick a jury? Because when I sat in that courtroom and I looked at the jury, we had some young folks, men and women. We had some older folks and some in between, and I was like really impressed. Like to me, it was a true cross section of the county that you were in, which is a bit of a pain in the backside county, but it was to me it looked like a true cross section. So tell us a little bit about tell me like what was your initial kind of feeling about that stuff.
So this was actually the third time I sat in on jury selection. The last time I did, I was the second seat, which means I was just sitting next to the person trying the case, assisting them. And then the time before that, I helped my boss pick a jury, and the case settled after jury selection. So this was actually my third time picking a jury, and it's kind of fun because you get to ask all these people questions, get to know them, get to try to evaluate and be strategic with who you want to put on the jury. Um, you have certain rules where you could agree with the other defendant, the other attorneys, your adversary. You could agree that this person's not meant to be on the jury, or they're biased, or they know somebody and related to somebody that would make them biased, so you could automatically get rid of them. So it's almost like a strategy to try to get a jury that you think would like your client and be sympathetic to your client. You also have what's called preemptory strikes, where you're allowed a certain amount of strikes where you can remove jurors. So you have to strategically use those to figure out who you want on, who you don't want on. Ultimately, you don't really know how the jury is going to react and how the jury is going to hear your case, because you can't really tell them much about the case and get their opinions on the case in jury selection. So it's almost like a guessing game. And we lucked out with a great jury, and it was almost like a chess match.
So let me ask you about that chess match. So just so people listen, because again, you only see TV, right? And there's a lot of what I would call to the rest of the world boring crap that goes on, right, at every stage. Like, what you don't see is you see the jury in the jury box, you know, you know, rapidly listening to the opening and the cross examination. What you don't see is the hours of stuff before, right? So how many
Right.
jurors did you and the defense go through? You ended up with 9 people, right? 6 jurors and 3 alternates.
Yeah.
Did you go through 50 people, 20 people, 100 people, approximately?
So what happens is we go to the jury selection room where all the jurors are waiting, where everyone was thrilled to be there for jury selection. And they put you into a room. If there's multiple cases going on, they break up the jurors into groups and they go into different rooms with the attorneys for that case. So for our room, we had about 45 to 50, maybe even 55 jurors in that room.
Wow.
And what happens is you panel them. So you bring up the first 8. Sometimes it's 6, sometimes 8, sometimes 12. So you bring up the first 8 into the front row. You ask them all these questions. You go through their questionnaires that they fill out about their life, what they do for work, where they
So let me let
live.
me let me stop you there for a second. So the juror, if you're a juror, you have to fill out a form that says things like what, where do you live,
Mhm.
hobbies,
Exactly.
colors you like.
Where do you live, hobbies, what your relatives do for work, whether you have anybody that's in law
Mm.
enforcement, medical field, the law field, whether you've served on a jury before, what your hobbies are, where you live, how old you are, your schooling, your everything, all that
And
all that
I
basic information.
and then you have a series of questions you want to ask. The defense has a series of questions. You have these preemptory strikes where you can just get rid of people.
Right.
And the goal is to, try to pick those 6 people that you think are going to like your client the most.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. So we had the 8 paneled, and I think we went through 3 or 4 panels. So, and they get faster and faster as you go along. The first one is long because you have to ask every single question. And the people behind them hear the questions too. So you don't have to
Okay.
necessarily repeat everything. So when the next group comes up, you're like, all right, you've heard a lot of my questions already. Anybody have any opinions on this or that? And you work through it. I think after the first panel, we had 3 or 4. Then the next panel, we had 2 or 3 we took, so that was
Right.
5. And then from the third panel, we took 1 juror that made it 6, and then 3 alternates.
So, again, I wasn't there for that. So, did you tell them how long you thought the trial would be before we get to the length? How
Yeah,
long did you
so
think it was?
I break it down. I start by just relating to them, trying to make them laugh, like me, stuff like that, and
Oh, it's a
then I get
smile. Come on.
yeah, right, and then I get into some brief facts about the case, whether anybody has any opinions one way or another. Then I break down what a trial is, where the timing, how you have to award money. So I talk about the timing. Does the timing not work for anyone? If there's, let's say you're taking care of a sick child, obviously we're not going to make you serve on a jury. Or if you're a primary caretaker of an elderly person and you can't get coverage for a week, we understand that, and we allow people to, not serve on the juries. We're not going to force them to do that if they can't. And then we talk about the finances where we're awarding money, and is anyone uncomfortable with that? Then I go into their questionnaires about their personal life to see if they have any
So,
biases.
so how long did you think the trial was going to be?
So we told them it would be about a week, possibly 2 weeks.
And
It
so
ended up being 7 days.
Right, and it wasn't really a full 7 days. I know that on a couple of the days, they literally had, like, a half day of work. I know there
Yeah,
was one day where, like, after the initial component, there was some witness issues, so the jury could go home for the day.
yeah. Or we
Yeah,
started late at 2 o'clock some days,
right.
so it wasn't really a full day every day. But generally, you go from 9:30 to 4:30 with a break from 12:30 to 2.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask this question too. Again, let's stick to what we're going to do is this. We're going to talk about the fun part of the trial in another episode.
Okay.
But I think that I think the jury thing is fascinating because we all get called for jury duty, even lawyers,
Yeah.
and it can be a regular jury, a civil case, a criminal case. It could be a grand jury. So we're all going to be faced with this. So, um, when what did I want to say about this? So when you guys were, picking what I noticed is this: when you picked a jury, and when they were sitting there listening during the trial, they were pretty darn attentive. Like they made it serious in terms
Right.
of paying attention. So let's take our cell phone, right? Where were the cell phones?
The court officer takes them away.
Wow,
I know. And
wow.
you can't take notes. Well, I guess it depends on the judge and what the rules are for that court, but you can't take your own personal notes and then bring them in to
So
consider
so
the case.
so this is like truly old fashioned. I mean, I'm talking old fashioned, as in you come in, you listen,
Yes.
you then you have nothing. I assume they can get their phones maybe during a break to check on
Yes.
things and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But like, I know what it's like when I put this phone away or I leave the phone in another room. I start to get a little fidgety.
Like,
So
what is someone trying to reach me? Is there an emergency? I need my phone to make sure people can contact me.
wow,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. So yeah, so I was very impressed. It was funny sitting. I was sitting in the second row behind the claimant, some other people there, uh, with your boss, and we were really intent watching the jury when you did your opening statements, when you did your closing, and like when they deliberated, when they came back in, like we were like watching. Were they looking at the client? Were they looking away?
Yeah.
Um, it really is and that in and of itself, right? To be very clear, you spent a lot of time preparing just to pick a jury.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with the case at that point. You were literally like, it's a whole art in and of itself to
Right.
try to pick a jury.
Right. And a lot of times what happens is you pick a jury, your adversary realizes, wow, they're serious. They want to try this case. You might get a favorable jury. They might think you have a favorable jury, so they try to settle the case. In this matter, there was no possibility of settling, so we went forward with the trial.
Yeah, and spoiler alert, we're not going to tell you all the details, but we have a winner. Ding 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 ding. So
Yes.
that was awesome, and I think we can talk about some of the fun details of the case and what you went through in our next episode.
Yeah. I
Um,
just want to briefly run through it so
yep, please.
I can put it out there. But it was a bifurcated trial, like you explained, meaning that you tried the liability portion, who's responsible first, and then you try the damages, which is the injuries, pain and suffering, how much the case is worth. So to be completely honest with you, I thought it was a very hard case to win. We were going against the town and the MTA.
That's the
After
Metropolitan Transportation Authority for anybody
yes,
that lives outside the New York area. Those are the train and bus people.
yes, which everyone loves so much. Um, so at the end of liability, we had witnesses from every party. We had a expert for the case that we had, and at the end of that, the judge will allow a defendant to have a directed verdict where the judge will let the defendant out of the case if we didn't prove the facts and it shouldn't go to the jury. So one of the defendants, the town, the judge said that we didn't prove our case against them, so they were let out of the case. But the MTA was not let out of the case and it went to the jury and the jury determined that the MTA was responsible for this accident. So then
Yep.
we're thinking we might have some time to prepare for the damages portion, but the judge told us to come back the next day to do our opening statements. So the very next day, spent the whole night preparing. The very next day, we did the opening statements for the damages portion. We put doctors on the stand as witnesses, and then we asked the jury for a certain amount of money, and they came back and awarded us about half of it, which ended up being $1.5 million.
Well done. So I mean, I almost cried. I was and just watching you do it and the result you got. I really was. It was really funny. Speaking to the point of you not having a lot of additional time to prepare. So that was a Thursday. You got your, and I remember this. You got your verdict on liability. So you knew you'd have to go forward, and you figured you'd have the weekend to prepare and start on Monday. And that night I went out with Howie with some doctors, and we went out to a really nice steakhouse. And we figured you might be tagging along to celebrate the win. So we're out at this fancy steakhouse, schmoozing these doctors, eating and having some wine. And you were back in the office dealing with your clients and spending a very late night of trying to get ready.
Yes. Which I want to share the tire story. When was that?
Okay.
Was that Tuesday night?
That was right at yeah.
Yeah, that was
Was
right after the openings and my
Yeah, so
client's
let's take a
insurance.
few extra minutes and
Okay.
yeah, absolutely. So let's just say I came home. I left the courthouse and I had to come over the Tappan Zee Bridge, the Cuomo Bridge. I come over the bridge and head back to my office, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go do some work. I was so proud of Noah and his opening, and I get a phone call.
Yes. So I'm driving back over the bridge from the courthouse. I was going to go back to the office because this was Tuesday night, and Wednesday was the biggest day of the liability portion, because I had four witnesses on the stand. I was going to have the responding police officer, my expert, and the two witnesses from the two defendants. So I had to prepare for four witnesses that night. And I was prepared already, but I wanted to refresh and prepare more. Just to make it clear, I don't do things last minute. So I'm driving home, and all of a sudden the warning light goes on that I have a flat tire. So I go to the gas station. I'm thinking I could just maybe fill it up with air and be fine. It ends up being like 10. 10. What's the tire pressure measurement?
You were supposed to be around 35 psi, and I think you're
Yes,
at
I
like
was at like
20.
20. I was at 20 something psi. So I had to fill my tire up. I went back to the office. I prepared. I called him in a panic, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I have no time to get my tire fixed. I have the biggest day of the trial tomorrow. I'm freaking out. But luckily, I was able to drop the car off at home and take his car for the next day, and he was able to get my tire fixed for me. But it was a bit of a scare in the middle of the biggest day of preparation for the biggest day of the trial.
Yeah, had the case been going on in the city in New York City, you could have hopped on a train and just gone to the city. But Noah lives he lives just over the border in Connecticut. His office is in White Plains, and then you go over the bridge to Rockland County. So he had to do this kind of commute and back and forth. So luckily, Dad doesn't live far away, and he
Yes.
got
I don't know what I would have. I would have had to Uber everywhere for the rest of the week. I had no time to get the tire fixed.
Which, one last really funny story about travel. It turns out one of the defense attorneys, the main guy that Noah was up against, was from like Southern Jersey. So he was staying in a hotel near the courthouse. And after like the liability piece, he had checked out of his hotel, figuring that, we'll come back on Monday. He could go home for the weekend. And then he
And
had
we won.
anyway, so I find this fascinating because this is not just you with your trial and learning about this, but it's real life. I think there's a lot more we're going to talk about with we
Right.
can do in the next episode with the
All right.
actual
Details of the trial.
trial.
Okay.
But I think it's coming up to. Are we on our time? Yeah, we're about our normal time limit. So that was exciting. Very proud of Noah.
Thank you.
Very, very proud of you, my son, the lawyer. I get to say
Yes.
that.
Yes. I had a lot of fans in in the back between you and Howie.
Oh yeah.
I only had 2 fans, but I had more than twice as many as anyone else.
And it was this gigantic old courtroom. So
Uh,
it was
is
pretty cool stuff.
the last note I'll say, it's called the Thurgood Marshall Courtroom because in 1967, I believe it was, he argued a segregation case about a town or village in Rockland that was still segregated. And that was shortly before he was elected to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, no, that was pretty amazing stuff. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this part of the conversation, and stay tuned for our next installment as we get into some of the fun details. And I like the details of this trial because it kind of shows you what you go through for any type of injury when it's, you know, not clear. Like, it's very clear that if you're parked at a red light and a gigantic city bus drives up behind you and smushes you, it's pretty clear what's going on. This was not so clear and is more of what life is like, where it could be a little bit of this or that. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we'll get into details next time.
But I am Brian. I am the dad and a lawyer, and you can follow me at the Disability Guys.
And I'm Noah, the lawyer, and you can follow me at Noah Lawyer.
And you're going to be able to see more of his swag in the near future.
Yes,
Have
I'm
a
working
great
on it.
day.
All right, have a great day, everybody.